All right. Okay, so now, well, we're going on to Clotaire II. And funnily enough, this was all about Fredegund. Remember the one, she only wanted her sons to become king and not the sons of the other wives. And so thus she was systematically killing them all off. Well, as this had continued, there she is now left with this one, is Clotaire II. And he does become king of Nuestra. I do have this page open. We can leave it on it. He's not the most attractive thing on a coin, is he? Here. They really have a big noggle on him, his nose. But here, Fredegund, we'll call her the... Gosh dang, she was really thought she was the player of all. We have her down here, another image of her. Here she is. Fredegund is cursed by Prextastus, and here he is. He's on his deathbed, so he's giving her a curse. But you can already tell, how she is, and that she already acts as perhaps more important than the king himself. So anyway, so this one region is the region that Clotaire II is dealing with right now. All right, so I'm going to turn off my cutesy video and go back to reading. I did have the last 2 pages of Chilperic the First to finish. All of his efforts to make him quit this sanctuary were fruitless and unavailing. At length, determined to remove him by force, he wrote on his subject to Saint Martin, whose indignation was fearful of incurring. His letter was in the form of a consultation and was placed on the tomb of the saint. Yes, I kind of read this already, didn't I? Okay, so let's go to the end of the end. Oh, Merovius, on his part, implored the protection of the same saint against the raged... Oh, no, I did that one as well. Okay, I guess I'm going to have to listen to where I stopped. Sorry. All right, so back to business. In the meantime, Childebert, forgetting his adopted son, entered into a league with Chilperic against the king of Burgundy. Hostilities commenced with the surprise of that part of Marseille which had belonged to Sigebert, which was now the object of contention. A civil war, which broke out at this period in the kingdom of Austrasia, prevented the young prince from extending his conquests farther. Gontran profited by the occasion to make his peace with the king of Soissons, to whom he ceded Périgueux, Argonne, and all the places of which he had taken possession. But the league was soon renewed, and a battle was fought near Melun, in which both parties claimed the victory. The Burgundian prince next attacked the camp of Chilperic, killed a great number of his troops, and by this advantage paved the way to an accommodation, which was speedily concluded, and the 2 brothers and their nephew swore to observe an eternal friendship for each other. At the conclusion of this war, the King of Spain, sent ambassadors to ask the hand of Riguntha, daughter to Fredegonda, the beast we'll call her, for his youngest son, Recarede. Oh my gosh, I have got things blinging and blanging. So yes, that's an unusual spelling, of course. They're saying Recarede, Recarede. The court of Soissons affected to start some difficulties at first, but the marriage was at length concluded. This was the last fortunate event of the reign of Chilperic. His only son, Thierry, died suddenly soon after. Childebert and Gontran were continually at war with him. Compelled to shut himself up in Cambrai with all his treasures, he rarely appeared at the head of his armies, and never undertook any expedition of importance. Having gone to pass some days at a favourite feat called Chelles, he was stabbed on his return from the chase one evening. So he went out hunting and he was stabbed on return. Expired on the spot. It is probable the assassin was not known, as Gregory of Tours, a contemporary writer, does not mention his name. Fredegarius, who seems to have written merely for the purpose of tarnishing the reputation of Brunehaut, ascribes his death to that princess. An author who did not write till long after this period assures us, on the contrary, that it proceeded from Fredegonda. The fact, as he relates, is this. Chilperic, just before he left out for the chase, went to the queen's chamber, who, hearing someone approach, thought it was a person named Landry, with whom she maintained a criminal intercourse. This mistake led her to make use of some expressions which discovered the intrigue to her husband. The king left the room abruptly and appeared to be involved in thought. Fredegonda sent for her lover, whom she informed of what had passed. And in order to elude the punishment he was conscious of deserving, he determined to murder his sovereign. All right. So now it's edging towards that it was her lover that did it. Thus perished the Nero of the French Empire, which he exposed to every kind of calamity, the executioner of his family, which he seemed intent on exterminating, and the tyrant of his subjects, whom he so loaded with taxes that they were compelled to abandon their possessions. Every acre of vine paid a barrel of wine. A poll tax was levied not only on every slave, but on every free person. And no kind of effects whatever was exempt from imports. Not that these tributes were absolute innovations. The chief part of the revenue of the first kings of France consisted of provisions and effects, which were levied in the same manner as tithes are now. But Chilperic had prodigiously augmented them. He was tyrannical avaricious of money, and ostentatiously magnificent in his furniture and equipages, voluptuous even to debauchery. His incontinence knew no bounds. Incontinence? Now see, I'm thinking that's wrong, isn't it? But it is incontinence, how it is spelt. Okay, and if he was faithful at last to Fredegonda, his fidelity was rather the effect of fear than of duty. Superstitious, yet impious, he scarcely believed in God, whose ministers were to him objects of incessant raillery, though his respect for Saint Martin and his fear of offending him were inexpressibly great. Vain, presumptuous, and rash, he dared to found the depths of religious mysteries, and to submit them to the feeble and inadequate standard of human reason, in consequence of which he had planned an edict to prohibit any distinction of persons in the Trinity. But the vigilant and intrepid zeal of Gregory of Tours and of Silvius, Bishop of Albi, induced him, though not without great difficulty, it suppresses it. Anxious to acquire the reputation of an author and a wit, he composed some volumes of stupid prose, and some of poetry still more insipid. He wanted to add all the double letters of the Greek alphabet to that of the French. He ordered them to not only be used in all publications, but to be inserted into the old. This intention was to represent by one character what before required several to express. The custom, however, ended with his reign. At the death of this prince, a striking example was exhibited of the little reliance to be placed by bad kings on the homage of an idolatrous court. The incense of courtiers is offered to their rank, and not to their persons, while adoration hangs on the lip, contempt and hatred sit enthroned on the heart. The body of Chilperic, forsaken by every one, would have remained on the spot where he was killed, but for the interference of Maleufus, Bishop of Senlis, who had it conveyed to Paris, where it was interred in the church of Saint-Germain-des-Prés. He left but one son, an infant of 4 months, who succeeded him under the name of Clotaire. He had 3 wives: Audovera, whom he repudiated; Galfuinda, who was found dead in her bed; and Fredegonda, who plunged him into an abyss of crime and enormities. So off we go. It's done with Chilperic, I'm afraid. He's been ousted after the chase. Now we have Clotaire II, 584 AD. Childebert was at Meaux with Chilperic when Chilperic was assassinated. The presence of so formidable an enemy so near to the court struck the mother of Clotaire with terror, shuddering at the recollection of her crimes. detested by her subjects whom she had oppressed without mercy, devoid of confidence in the nobles, who openly censored her conduct, pursued by the king of Austrasia, who imputed the death of his father to her, an object of hatred to Gontran, who dreaded her treachery, and solely relying for protection upon an infant of 4 months. She fled to Paris, where she was received by the bishop of that metropolis, who placed her in his church, where she was received by the bishop as a retreat that would secure her from the resentment of the 2 kings. It was from thence that she wrote to the king of Burgundy, offering him the crown of Chilperic, entreating him to act as a father to his nephew, and assuring him that she was less anxious to reign than to increase the number of her subjects. This prince, touched with compassion, hastened to the capital of the French Empire, where he took Clotaire under his protection and openly declared himself in favour of Fredegonda against Childebert, who in vain called on him for justice on the assassin of a father, an aunt, an uncle, and 2 cousin Germans. Childebert was even forbidden to enter Paris. One of his ambassadors, who had been so bold as to threaten Fredegonda with the law of retaliation, was sent back in disgrace, and his designs on Tours and Poitiers, which had formerly belonged to his father, were frustrated. Those cities, constrained to yield to a superior force, took an oath of fidelity to Gontran, who was considered as guardian to the 2 young monarchs and as head of the nation. So Clotaire is being kept secreted away in Paris. The conduct of the Burgundian prince had a great effect on the minds of the French nobles. Young Clotaire was proclaimed king of Soissons, and they assigned him a 3rd part of the kingdom of Carabas, but took away from him Touraine, Saintonge, Périgueux, Agenois, the Limousin, and the Albigeois, which his father had usurped from Childebert. It does not, however, appear that this young prince was master of Soissons, though Gontran, in the sequel, ceded Paris to him. Fredegonda was declared regent, a privilege which formerly was always enjoyed by the queen dowagers, Brunehaut, under Childebert II, Bathilda under Clotaire III, Nantilda under Clovis II, Ali of Champagne under Philippe the August, and Blanche of Castile under Saint Louis. Louisa of Savoy under Francis I, and governed the state with absolute power during the minority or absence of their royal children. So these are the names you often see in genealogy leading to the monarchy. This custom was passed from the throne, or after the monarchy, rather, after the French kings of normal castle times. This is a bit earlier. This custom had passed from the throne into private families. The French law, both old and new, gives to mothers the guardianship and garde noble of their children, which means, says pasquier, the government of their persons and possessions, whether sipes or not. I'll say sipes, but I think they were fiefs, sipes. All right, kind of like probably a slave, sort of. The power of the regent was equal to that of the king, whose revenues he received, without the obligation of accounting for them. Justice was administered in his name. All edicts, grants, and patents were sealed with his own seal when he was a prince of the blood, and when he was not with a seal peculiar to the regency. He disposed of all offices and employments, received homage from the vassals of the crown, and was the sovereign arbiter of peace and war. This authority appeared to be of such enormous extent that Charles V undertook to restrain it, at least in its duration, for which purpose he published an ordinance declaring the king to be of age at 14 instead of 22, as before. By a law of Charles VI, it was enacted that the heir to the crown, though an infant, should be proclaimed king immediately after the death of his predecessor. But the necessity of this law is not very apparent. Okay. Since, notwithstanding the assertion of Velay, John I, son of Louis Hutin, was, although an infant, formally proclaimed King of France and Navarre, and as we shall hereafter have occasion to show. It appears from another ordinance of Charles V that the regency was sometimes distinguished from guardianship. It is there declared that if Charles should die during the minority of his son, the Duke of Anjou, his brother, should be regent of the kingdom and the Queen. But this edict was only temporary, and these two titles, which had formerly been united, were never more separated. 585 AD. But the oppressive conduct of Frédégonde, the indolence of Gontran, and the weakness of Childebert had led many of the French nobles to entertain thoughts of, shushing. What? Thoughts of shushing a new matter. Bring that word back, shushing. The heads of the conspiracy were General Didier, who had so often commanded the armies of Chilperic, Mumol, so highly celebrated for his martial achievements, and Duke Beauson, the most artful courtier, and the most deceitful man that ever existed. The person they brought forward as the instrument of their designs was no common adventurer. It was Gondebaud, that illustrious child of misfortune, who was very generally received as the son of the first Clotaire. He had been involved in the disgrace of his mother, who placed him under the protection of Childebert I, and that monarch conceived so strong an affection for him that he even intended to adopt him. But he had not sufficient resolution to withstand the pressing solicitations of his brother, who, after he had disowned him, was contented with cutting off his hair. Such an instance of moderation in such a monarch as Clotaire affords a strong presumption in favour of the pretended impostor. The death of his persecutor revived the hopes of Gondebaud, who experienced from the new court of Paris the same gracious reception and the same base treachery that he had met with from the old one, being delivered by Caribert, who esteemed him to Sigebert, who oppressed him, his hair was again cut off, and he was banished to Cologne. He then fled to Italy, where he reassumed the title of Prince of France, and having taken a wife, went from thence to Constantinople, where he was treated with great respect and attention. We will want to know more about Duke Bosson, the most artful courtier and the most deceitful man that ever existed. But right now they're not discussing him. He was now recalled to France by the malcontents, who promised to raise him to the throne, and being seconded by Childebert, who supplied him with troops to oppose Gontran. He caused himself to be proclaimed king at Brive-la-Gaillarde, from whence he sent ambassadors to the King of Burgundy. In order to preserve them from danger, he gave them wands or holy canes, which were in effectual security among the French to those who carried them. But they were surprised at a time when they had not these sacred arms in their hands, and the whole secret of the conspiracy was forced from them by means of torture. Childebert, apprised of a correspondence between the new monarch and some noblemen of this court, became reconciled to his uncle, who once more adopted him by showing him to the army and putting a lance in his hand, which was the ancient mode of designating the successor to the crown. The King of Burgundy immediately sent a powerful army to the banks of Garonne, under the command of Louis-de-Guifelis, and on the news of its approach, Gondebaud retreated towards the Pyrenees and took possession of the Comminges, a place which, from the strength of its situation and from being well stocked with provision and ammunition of all kinds, was in a condition to sustain a siege of several years. But this prince was ever doomed to be the victim of treachery. He was betrayed to the Burgundian general by those same traitors who had proclaimed him king, and immediately put to death. His hair was torn from his head, and his body ignominiously dragged around the camp, where it was left to rot in the open air. The perfidious conduct of the Garifons of Comminges soon experienced the chastisement, the chastisement it deserved. They were all put to the sword. Their general Mamoul was assassinated, which is hard to believe after he had led so many and killed so many, and Bishop Sagittarius massacred by the king's orders. Such were the victims that were sacrificed to the manes of a prince who wanted neither courage nor prudence. These horrid executions restored tranquillity to the subjects of Gontran. That prince, before he left Paris, had established a council of regency to govern jointly with Fredegonde, whom he now began to mistrust, and left, I can't believe she's still there, and they haven't topped her yet, and lest she should acquire too great an influence in the capital of the French Empire. He compelled her to retire to Vaudreuil, we'll say it, Vaudreuil, a royal palace about 12 miles from Rouen. The regent, enraged at this division of her power, resolved to assassinate Bruniho, with whom she imagined the plan originated. But the plot was discovered, and the assassin sent back with contempt to Fredegonda, who, in a transport of her fury, mingled with shame. Mingled with shame, ordered his hands, here it comes, and feet to be cut off. She dispatched one of her chamberlains at the same time to enter into a treaty with Gondebaud, whom she wished to secure as an instrument that might enable her to shake off the yoke of the court of Burgundy. But the capture and death of that prince marred all her projects. Again, reduced solely and reliably on the protection of Gontran, she earnestly entreated him to stand godfather to her son, an office the acceptance of which was in those times regarded as the strongest pledge of amity and affection, and the most solemn promise of an inviolable attachment. Yes, I have a godfather, godmother, but I don't think it's gone well for me. But yes, that is an old thing that just kept passing down. Isn't that interesting? Her delay to have the ceremony performed gave rise to suspicions on the birth of the child. The Burgundian prince, in particular, openly expressed his doubts, which, coming to the ears of the queen, she hastened him in alarm, and swore that Clotaire was the real son of Chilperic. She also made 3 bishops of her acquaintance and 300 other witnesses swear the same thing. This monarch was no longer permitted to doubt the truth of a fact thus solemnly attested. He even coincided with Fredegunda in the necessity of deferring the ceremony, which was performed 6 years after the village of Nanterre. At the village. Such was the ancient mode of verifying all doubtful circumstances. The party, so interesting, they met together to verify all doubtful circumstances. The party accused was not admitted to clear himself by oath, unless his oath was confirmed by those of persons who were either related to him or were of his own sect or possession, or at least who lived in his neighborhood. It was requisite that these witnesses should be people of irreproachable conduct, acquainted with the accuser, and if they were not ecclesiastics, resident in the place where they made their disposition. In earlier times they were drawn by lot. They were mostly brought forward by the party accused, seldom by the accuser. Their number depended on circumstances. More or less were required, according to the importance of the cause and the merit of quality of the parties concerned. The judge, by way of warning them to be careful in what they were going to dispose, either pulled them by or gave them a gentle box on the ear. The oath could only be administered on those certain days in the morning, yes, and fasting, and in the church, either upon the altar, the cross, the testament, the canon of the Mass, the tomb of a saint, or upon some shrine. The party accused laid his hands upon that of the witness at the time he was delivering his evidence, and protested in a loud voice that he was innocent of the crimes imputed to him. This ceremony, which was productive of so much perjury, cleared him from all further prosecution. So there was something going on there with how they conducted their law, and when they did say drawn by lot, they're definitely getting, that's their voting system. Gontran, on his return from Burgundy, gave orders to assemble a council at Maison with a view to procure the condemnation of those prelates who had espoused the cause of Gondebaud. He had already published an ordinance inflicting penalties on such of the nobles as he had neglected to follow the army of Ludegephilis, and the commissaries, appointed to levy them, executed their charge with the utmost rigour. The ecclesiastics too, who had omitted to supply their stipulated quota of men, were treated with equal severity. But there were some prelates who had shown a more evident and decisive partiality to the usurper. Theodorus, who passed for a saint, had received him at Marseille, and at Cahors he had experienced the same degree of favour from another prelate. The bishops of Bordeaux, Exeante, and Bézard had even consecrated Fautinian, whom he had dominated in the bishopric of Acquisition. Childebert interceded for Theodorus, who was set at liberty and permitted to take his seat with the rest. Fautinian was disposed, but allowed to retain the rank and honours of a bishop. It was enacted by the decree of the council that those who ordained him should pay him an annuity of 100 crowns of gold. The prelate who received him at Cahors was excommunicated, condemned to abstinence from meat and wine for 3 years, and prohibited during that time from the celebration of the holy mysteries. But what appears strange is that he was ordered to remain in his diocese, and accepting the power of ordaining priests, or of consecrating churches, and bestowing his benediction on the holy chrism. He was allowed to exercise every other part of his episcopal functions. We are told that a prelate had the presumption to maintain, in the presence of the council, that woman could not be called man, which occasioned great disputes among the fathers. At length, however, the authority of the Scriptures, which expressly say that God created man, male and female, was received as decisive. Okay, so let's... God created man, male and female, was received as decisive. That was how they were going with it. big decision there. All right, how long have I gone on this one? Oh, I'm already 40 minutes in. I could stop here. They're going to start with a couple of wars. All right, so I'll give you all a break. Well, yeah, Clotaire goes on for, let's see, 1, 2, let's see how many more pages. This was a very busy section. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, I'll change to the next. All right, thank you for listening.